Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Sego ani buju wachaya kwekwe. As the mayor of the city of Kingston, I offer these words in the spirit of this gathering. Let us bring our good minds and hearts together as one to honor and celebrate these traditional lands as a gathering place for original peoples and their ancestors who were entrusted to care for Mother Earth since time, parking garages, and a zoning bylaw amendment related to secondary suites. So with that, I will ask for a motion to rise without reporting.
It's moved by Councillor Turner, second by Councillor Osanek. The Council rise from Committee of the Whole, closed meeting without reporting.
Please vote. And that carries. Next, we have the approval of the addeds. We have the withdrawal of one delegation and the addition of 3 new delegations. We have a change in one of the reports from EITP, from Planning Committee, and from the Heritage Committee. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor Bone. Please vote. Still one person to vote. And that carries. Are there any disclosures of potential pecuniary interest? Councillor George.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is in regards to Clause 3 of the Committee of the Whole closed session. I, Kevin George of the Council of Corporation of the City of Kingston, declare my potential pecuniary interest in the matter of Clause 3 of the Committee of the Whole closed session, as I have clients affected by the subject matter. And I guess further to that, I've been notified it will be on the addeds for the Planning Committee, so I will be declaring my pecuniary interest in that as well, for the same purpose.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other disclosures of pecuniary interest, we do have one presentation this evening. Michelle Langlois, General Manager, Director of Marketing, Downtown Kingston, BIA, and Sandy Wilson of Alexander Wilson Architects will present Council with a frame set of the limited edition 2014 Pewter Collection and announce the 2015 Pewter Collection.
Thank you, Your Worship. And thank you all for welcoming us tonight. My name is Sandy Wilson. As I was introduced, I'm an architect in Kingston and a former elected member of the Downtown Kingston BIA. And I'm here tonight with Michelle Langlois, who's the Senior Manager for the Downtown Kingston Business Improvement Area. Downtown Kingston is proud to announce that 2015 marks the 22nd anniversary of the limited edition Pewter Collectibles program. Each holiday season, 5 of Kingston's most beloved and well-known landmarks are selected to be cast as holiday pewter ornaments. It's a chance to celebrate the wide array of local properties that are rich with historic value. This program has been and continues to be tremendously popular with Kingstonians, previous residents, and tourists. Each ornament has a value of over $20, but it's made available to everyone for only $10 each, upon presentation of $25 worth of receipts from downtown businesses. Expert opinions are coupled with valuable input from the public during the building selection process. The committee does its best to ensure each year's collection is balanced, attractive, and representative of the sites that we have to choose from in Kingston. And Michelle, the winners are?
First of all, it's hard to believe it's been 22 years. I think for about 20 of those years, each year we have a committee that says, I don't know, I don't think we can pull this off again. So we're very pleased that we've managed to do it again. This year's collection will be launched on Monday, November 16. One ornament is available each Monday until the final ornament on December 14. This year, we're going to feature Cook's Fine Foods, and Cook's is celebrating their 150th anniversary this year. Banry Hall at Queen's University, which is the oldest women's residence at Queen's. the beautiful Belvedere Hotel on King Street, Robert Meek Public School on Bagot, which is home of the Kingston Boys and Girls Club, and the LaSalle Causeway. And the little unknown factoid with the LaSalle Causeway is that it was designed by the same man who designed the Golden Gate Bridge. So, as Sandy mentioned, each ornament is available for only $10 upon presentation of $25 worth of receipts from downtown businesses, and that's any business. It could be your dentist, it could be 2 weeks worth of coffee. And ornaments are available for sale at the Visitor Information Center at Confederation Park on Ontario Street, at the K-Rock Center box office, as well as the Grand Theatre. And in celebration of this project and history, we would like to present the Mayor and City Council with 2014 set of pewter ornaments. Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to delegations, we have 3 delegations on the agenda. Just a reminder to all the delegations that you have 5 minutes, and then you can take questions from council. First delegation is Jimmy Hassan, resident, who will appear before council to speak to new motion number 1, received by Councillor McLaren and Councillor Candon with respect to Federal Bill C-24, strengthening the Canadian Citizenship Act. Mr. Hassan.
Your Worship, Mr. Mayor Patterson, respected member of the Council, my fellow citizens, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity tonight to speak before the Council about Bill C-24. Many of may you know, if it's not, then Councillor McLaren has put the details in his motion very well. But for those who don't know, I'll let you know the Bill C-24 came in effect in June 2014, and it's creating 2 classes of citizens, and plus is affecting all those 863,000 Canadian who have the dual nationality, or many of those who will be eligible and not knowing that they are eligible for that. It's about them. Under this bill, everyone who has a dual nationality or will be eligible to dual nationality, they can be taken their citizenship away from them in the case of any kind conviction. Ladies and gentlemen, as an immigrant to this country, I have not chose this country to call me as a second-class citizen. When I migrated to this country, I was offered a respect, security, prosperity, and growth, and a safe home for my future generation and my children. I adopt this country, I adopt this community for all these reasons. When I came to know about this Bill C-24, it broke my heart. I couldn't sleep for a few days, wondering and asking myself, I came to this country, I brought my kids here, actually they're born here, and then what is their future will be when I will not be living this life? They will have no ties with my country, they will not speaking my language, they will not know the political, social, and provided us under the Charter of Rights as a Canadian. We all proud to be Canadian. And I'm one of those who always feel that I'm a blessed Canadian here. I'm living on the best pieces. My heart is broken. I'm finding the way I have to go from here. What is my destination? What happened, what I am doing. And a year ago, I was at this podium for let my fellow Canadians know that we need to educate our new generation that lack of interest in the civic duties. And it's strange for me to being here today to express myself that I am not feeling that anymore. Because I don't know how I can tell my children this is your country. I don't know how I can make them solidary Canadian. I don't know how I can raise them as a good and law-abiding citizen, nor myself. I have my fellow security around the world. When I travel with the Canadian passport, I have my head up and I have my chest widened when I present my passport to the immigration in the world. They don't treat me with my color. They will be laughing at the counter. Might be they asking me to get into the second line. Before, we have a separate line when you go to the other countries. You have a separate line and you walk through those systems and those lines with respect and dignity. And you know that who are you. And people respect you as a Canadian. Ladies and gentlemen, let's not forget, we all came to this country one same reason, not economical, but safety, prosperity, love, compassion. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council? Councillor McLaren.
Thank you. May I ask, if you had known what you know now about Bill C-24, would that have affected your decision to come to Canada?
No, I will not. I will not come to Canada if I know I have a choice, because I left my country for the same reason. I was in the same threat. I will probably deny the justice. I will not be fairly treated. I will not have a fair opportunity to have the jobs, or I will not have the opportunity to raise my kid as a lawful citizen. But if I know that law before, I will not come to this country. And I know now there's many of the people in the queue that want to come to this country, maybe they will not come. And this will be bad for our economy locally and nationally.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, thank you very much. Okay, our second delegation this evening is Mr. Todd Hatley, resident who will appear before council to speak to report number 105, received from the Municipal Heritage Committee with respect to 218 Green Bay Road.
That's okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to address council and the mayor this evening. My name is Todd Hatley, and I'm the co-owner of 218 Green Bay Road. I'm here tonight to speak to the issue of 218 Green Bay Road. An application for demolition with conditions attached to rebuild was voted down yesterday by the Heritage Committee at a Heritage Committee meeting. I'm asking council to consider the original recommendation by City Heritage staff to allow for demolition with conditions attached. My spouse and I purchased 218 Green Bay Road in September 2013, fully aware that this was an important heritage building and would require additional costs and reconstructions to maintain. Our initial plan, we set about to renovate the building, returning three sides to the original state, removing buildings that had been added on to them already, and putting an addition on the rear of the building. That design work was done by New Dimension Design here in Kingston. The design went forward to Heritage Committee, and the request for renovation was approved by Heritage on June 9th, 2014, and by Council on July 15th, 2015. Concerns raised by the contractor in the fall of 2014 regarding the condition of the foundation led to further investigation of the state of the foundation during the spring of this year. Two engineering reports, one commissioned by us and one commissioned by the City of Kingston, reached fairly similar conclusions: that the foundation is in need of significant repair, and that there is a technical solution to undertake repair on the foundation, and that solution is called underpinning the foundation. There's a further challenge to underpinning this particular location grade. In order to understand the cost associated with repairing the foundation, I consulted with Carico Development to get a quote on underpinning the foundation. The cost of the repair came back at $417,469.60, not including tax, from which I removed $86,400 for repointing costs that would have been incurred regardless of what I had done, leaving a total of $331,096.60 to underpin the foundation and to repair damage to the brickwork caused by disrupting the foundation. This, I might add, is a quote that was done in consultation with local trades here in Kingston. Mr. Fuller, who's the engineer hired by the city, estimated in his professional opinion $200,000 to $250,000 to undertake foundation repair, but he had no time presented a written quote for the required work. In his report, Mr. Fuller also noted an element of risk involved in undertaking this type of work. As an option, repairing the foundation will get us to a point where we have a foundation, brick walls, windows, doors, and a roof. The interior of the house, which has already been removed, would have had to have been removed regardless in order to underpin the house, since underpinning requires trenching on both sides of the foundation, and there's no basement in this house. In an effort to compare costs, what it would cost me to return to the current state of the building if allowed, I received quotes on how much it would cost to remove the building, put in a new foundation, new brick walls, new roof, new windows and doors. The total of $85,000 to get to the same state as $331,000 gets me to is in the underpinning option, a difference of almost $250,000. There is no disputing that 218 Green Bay Road is a valuable heritage structure. That said, an identical building sits approximately 50 meters away on 407 Regent Street in Berryfield Village. There's another on the northwest corner of Patrick and Russell Street, and there are dozens of similar, if not identical, gable-end homes identified by Jennifer McKendry in the Heritage Impact Statement. We feel strongly, however, that the costs are an unreasonable expectation and burden to place upon a homeowner. We are therefore requesting that Council support the original proposal by City Heritage staff to allow for the demolition with conditions attached. This last slide is the proposed house, which is almost identical to the renovation plans with the exception that the house is clad in wood and not brick, and it's 4 feet wider.
30 seconds.
In conclusion, please allow us to demolish and rebuild a tribute home at a cost we can afford. Thank you for considering my position.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the delegation? Seeing none. Oh, Councillor Hutchison.
I just wondered, is that all the costs that are involved in the demolition? Are there not costs associated with the conditions of a demolition approval?
I'm not sure I understand your question, sir.
Well, if you could flip back to your costs.
Yeah. The demolition and removal number, $13,000?
Right.
That comes from Mulrooney Construction, the Mulrooney contractor who would do the demolition and removal of the property, of the building.
Those are physical costs. But aren't you being asked to fulfill certain conditions in order to be able to do that regarding the
Yeah, there's a condition that the house be photographed and measured, and the foundation be measured. That's one of the 12 conditions, I believe. And the other condition is that the house be reconstructed in masonry work, which was why I included the masonry, cost for masonry.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, and our third delegation this evening is Christine Sipnovich, President of the Berryfield Village Association, who will appear before Council to speak to report number 105 received from the Municipal Heritage Committee with respect to 218 Green Bay Road.
Can I get my key out? Yes, please. Sorry.
Mayor Patterson, councillors, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak. The Berryfield Village Association would like to express our strong support for the Heritage Committee's motion, passed 8-2, to deny permission to demolish the house at 218 Green Bay Road in Berryfield. As you may know, the Berryfield Village Association is composed of residents and property owners in Berryfield Village. Our mandate, according to our bylaw, is to conserve and protect the heritage character of Berryfield Village. 218 Green Bay Road is a handsome, well-proportioned Victorian brick house, circa 1885, which is certainly of heritage value. It is the only original heritage house in Green Bay and one of only 4 heritage brick houses in the village. Under the 1992 Heritage Conservation District Plan that governs the village, heritage buildings are to be retained wherever possible. The current draft of the revised plan states that demolitions shall not be permitted. As they say about heritage, once it's destroyed, it's gone forever. It's worth noting as well that the demolition of a heritage building in a heritage conservation district such as Barriefield means the loss of a vital part of the heritage fabric of the village as a whole, further undermining the proportion of heritage houses to non-heritage houses that is fundamental to the heritage designation, and raising the worry that the village is reaching the tipping point of new buildings outnumbering old. This is an issue we're pursuing with the current update of the Heritage Conservation District Plan. If Kingston prides itself on being a sustainable city, it should not permit the unnecessary destruction of houses, the removal of materials that constitute embodied energy, and the use of scarce natural resources to build anew. Heritage conservation and environmental stewardship go hand in hand. It's often said that the greenest building is the one still standing. Anyone who buys property in Barriefield knows that they're taking on a house in a heritage conservation district that involves special duties of upkeep, involving potentially costly restoration work. In the case of 218 Green Bay Road, it has to be noted that demolishing and rebuilding is a costly option too, and I would say probably more costly than the figures presented. We hope that the current owners appreciate their duty to undertake the necessary work to restore their home. It's a wonderful house they will treasure for years to come. Barriefield Village is Kingston's heritage village. The conservation of its heritage is a key component in driving the cultural tourism of this city. And it's one of the reasons that Kingston is such a wonderful place to live, work, study. Please conserve 218 Green Bay Road as part of the rich heritage of Kingston and Barriefield Village. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes, Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Your Worship. And through you, so the delegation, Ms. Sipnowich, has identified the value of the building to Barriefield and the value potentially to property owners in the area. What is the value of preserving this property, just in general terms? What is the public good that we are at risk of losing at the cost of $20 or $250,000, yeah. I suppose?
Well, Barriefield is a heritage conservation district. The city has recently approved making Sydenham Ward a heritage conservation district. So I think the city of Kingston appreciates that heritage is one of our greatest assets. And it's something that we can all appreciate whether we live in a heritage house or not. It's a common good, and I think we understand that heritage is fragile. Once you destroy a piece of heritage, it's gone. And Barriefield, I mean, it's worth noting that last year we celebrated the 200th anniversary of the village, and over 2,000 people came to the village. There were queues of cars snaking up and down Highway 15. So people were crowding into the village to celebrate its heritage, regarding it as something that is good for everyone, whether you live in Barriefield or not. It's a part of the public good of the city. And one of the things that people noted was how remarkable that there was still a significant aggregation of heritage houses. And these are not grand houses, as you can see, that it's an ordinary house, but it's a house of heritage value. It's a Victorian brick house. Sure, there are other ones, but there's not many brick houses in Barriefield, only, and I mentioned it's the only remaining heritage house in the Green Bay area. And I think anyone who understands the importance of heritage, not just as a kind of public responsibility of stewardship, but also key to the prosperity of the city. It's a vital part of the cultural tourism industry, and it's what attracts talent to this city to study and work and live. We know that people regard heritage as one of the key features of Kingston that makes it so attractive. So I think there are many reasons to think that one house actually plays a part in a whole panoply of important issues for the vitality and well-being of the city. I should also just say, I noted it, and I'll say it again, that there are a number of new buildings in Barriefield, and we're concerned that new not outnumber old. So demolishing old buildings is the last thing we should be contemplating. This is a building that can be restored and can be maintained. It's costly, but that's what you take on when you buy heritage property. You know you're going down that road.
Yes, Councilor.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the response. You've also alluded to the fact that it's more environmentally sustainable to maintain this building. Considering the cost that we saw in the presentation, it didn't actually really focus on operating costs, for example. Can you elaborate on that, on what you feel the costs are of maintaining versus demolition?
Right. Well, I mean, I think that something that people overlook is that when you tear a house down, this is, something that you're disposing of and dumping somewhere. So we're adding to the refuse that we're leaving on this earth when we destroy houses and get rid of them. And then, of course, we're using new materials. So there's the embodied energy of the old materials that we're throwing away, and then there's the new materials that we are using, and often involving a lot of plastics too, of course. So there's just an environmental cost, and that's why that expression, the greenest building is the one still standing. So that's for starters. And it's also well known, heritage conservationists will point out that it's possible to retrofit old houses to make them energy efficient. It's not the case that you have to build a new house to be concerned about energy conservation. So I think actually it's a really interesting synergy between environmental conservation and heritage conservation, that they have a common purpose.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Stroud.
Thank you, Your Worship. Professor Simpovich, could you tell me if you knew the previous owners of this house, and if you could say, would it be likely that the problems that the rear wall had would have been known to the previous owners and would have been disclosed at the time of sale?
I don't know anything about the nature of the sale. I introduced myself to the owners after the Heritage Committee. I made a similar presentation to the Heritage Committee, as you know, and after the committee refused the permission to demolish, I went up and introduced myself and said, welcome to Barriefield, and I'm delighted that you've got a heritage house, and I wish them well in restoring it. I don't know anything about the transaction. I mean, I think it would have been clear that that was a house that required work. It's right now in a tragic state of neglect, as this is now being decided, but it can be brought back to life. And I think we all looked upon this as an opportunity. It was an elderly, kind of typical story, an elderly couple who weren't able to maintain the house the way it would be desired. So new owners with resources to bring it back to life, that was an exciting possibility. But I don't know much about the particulars of the sale.
Thank you. And my second question is, what kind of a precedent do you think this would show if City Council backed demolition rather than restoration?
I think, I mean, one has to appreciate how tragic it is to see a heritage building being demolished, just sort of psychologically and symbolically, to see the wrecking ball knocking down a piece of history. That is a hugely distressing thing to witness, and I think it would set a very unfortunate precedent. A lot of the property in Barriefield is waterfront with views and so forth. One might worry that there would be an incentive to find ways of making a case for demolition in order to maximize the value of the lot, and that we would see a kind of snowballing of demolition requests. And not just Barriefield, of course, it's in the Ward and elsewhere. Heritage is fragile. We should cherish it. We should take pains to conserve it and appreciate the opportunity when it arises. Thanks.
Okay, seeing no other questions, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we have no briefings tonight. Are there any petitions to present? Councillor McLaren.
Thank you.
This petition is considering the motion today for a bill speaking against Bill C-24. We, the undersigned residents of Kingston, draw the attention of the City and Council of Kingston to the following: that Bill C-24 seriously impairs the principle of equality, creates two-tiered citizenship, and jeopardizes the in-migration of skilled labor. Therefore, we call on the Council of the City of Kingston to be our voice expressing issues with Bill C-24 and communicate the profound concern of our community to the Government of Canada by sending this petition to the new Prime Minister, the opposition party leaders, the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration, the opposition citizenship and immigration critics, and Kingston and the Island's new Member of Parliament. And it contains roughly 104 signatures.
Thank you. Next is Councillor George.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a petition with 65 signatures. This is from the King's Landing area, and it is we, the undersigned, petition the City of Kingston to investigate traffic conditions in the area commonly referred to as King's Landing. Several residents, especially in the area known as the Emerald Street Adult Lifestyle area, are concerned about these traffic conditions and beseech City Council to act on this matter. Would like a review for potential traffic calming measures in that neighborhood. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We have no motions of congratulations, recognition, sympathy, condolences, and speedy recovery. We have no deferred motions this evening, so we will move on to reports. Report number 99 from the CAO.
It's moved by Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Candon. The report number 99 from the Chief Administrative Officer, consent, received and adopted.
So there are 4 items. Would anyone like to separate any of them? Okay, seeing none, we will vote on them as a whole. Item A is the parking bylaw minor amendments. Item B is the Healthy Kids Community Challenge Agreement. Item C is the waiver of fees for the Salvation Army Christmas hamper distribution. And item D is the Kingston and the Islands Boat Lines Limited lease renewals on Crawford Wharf and Confederation Park. We'll call the vote. And that carries. Report number 100 from the CAO.
Moved by Councillor Schell, seconded by Councillor Bohm. The report number 100 from the Chief Administrative Officer recommend be received and adopted.
So there's just the one clause, expropriation settlement for property adjacent to Bell Park. We'll call the vote. And that carries. Report 101 from Planning Committee.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. It's my pleasure to present report number 101 from the Planning Committee and ask that it be received and adopted. Thanks.
It's moved by Councillor Schell, seconded by Councillor George. The report number 101 from the Planning Committee be received and adopted.
So there's just the one item, the application for zoning bylaw amendment 1660 to 1674 Sydenham Road. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a few questions through you to staff concerning some of the details of this. I know it's been through the planning process in the Planning Committee, but I just wanted to get some clarity on a few of the items here. So. My first question is, how does, so this item has a long history, and it's gone through a couple different owners of the property to get to this stage. How does this proposed rezoning protect our community from uses compared to how it's currently zoned?
Yes, Commissioner Hurdle.
So through you, Mr. In this particular instance, there's a number of things. I guess the application, as you spoke to earlier, has gone through a transition. The original shop being a legal non-conforming use. The proposal allows that use to basically be scoped to what it is today. With legal non-conforming uses, they do have permissions under our Community Planning Act. At any point in time, an owner may apply to have that use expanded over time, and that's at the purview of the Committee of Adjustment. In this particular instance, by locking up the existing structure, it ensures that it's fixed for the future. The only way to amend that use and expand it in the future is to come back to the whole of council with a separate proposal in the future.
Outside of what's been highlighted in the zoning bylaw. Is that fairly correct?
Through your worship to the whole of council, yes it is.
And in terms of this, how did this type of use get here? It's surrounded to the north by what looks like rural properties. There's fields and trees to the north, and then there's residential to the south of it, and that residential is the most dense area in my whole district, actually. So there's quite a few people living there that may be impacted if this use is not compatible with that community.
Through your worship to the whole of council, this particular existing use, the existing automobile shop, which is really the anchor on that property, it was, from our records, was established in the 1970s, and over time, the zoning bylaw has changed, and that use has become non-conforming as it's standing today. However, it's legal non-conforming, so it can still continue. Going forward, scoping the uses to a compatible range of intensity, providing appropriate buffering, and really scoping into that property will help to keep that area conserved. The area isn't pre-zoned or pre-designated for additional industrial development. It's really scoped to that particular property and the concrete plant across the street.
Okay, thank you. And could you just, two more questions, I'll ask them both right now. One is, when we say legal non-conforming, what does that mean exactly, so we can understand how that fits? I'm still getting my head around some of these things as a councillor. And then how do we prevent this from expanding? Will this lead to industrial creep? We're using a site across the road to justify the industrial zoning here as appropriate. So suddenly this gives a case for future landowners nearby to then say, well, there's two industrial uses nearby, we should be justified to move in there. Do you see what I mean? Like, we're worried about these uses growing into what is a residential rural area.
Through your worship to the whole of council, in terms of the legal non-conforming use, it's a fancy expression for essentially it was legalized sometime, and then over time that use is no longer permitted in the list of permitted uses with the zone. It's akin to, if I may use an analogy, as an example, if you have pulled a building permit for a garage to your home, and it's legal today, but over time, 5 or 6 years down the road, we decide as a community to remove that accessory use on a particular district. Anybody who had established their garage illegally prior to the passing of that change would still be able to keep their garage. They would still be allowed to renovate it. They may apply to expand it and make it larger through the committee, but essentially they did get that right at some point in time to establish that garage, but it's been lost over time through changes in community expectations, which are really an expression of our community planning documents, the official plan, the zoning bylaw. In terms of the ability to prevent an expansion of that use with legal non-conforming uses, there is a right as a property owner to make an application to the Committee of Adjustment to expand that use over time. It may be denied, depending on what the community expectations are at that time, but at any point in time that application could be made. With this particular proposal, we have included, although legalizing the use through the site-specific zone, by doing that, it caps it to the existing size of the facility today. So in essence, we've removed the ability to expand it without a much larger public process or rezoning process that they would need to apply for in the future again, should they want to expand it. And in terms of the industrial creep proposal, at this point in time, although there is an existing concrete plant and there is this existing small industrial scale use across the auto body shop and the additional proposed uses, The area isn't identified as an industrial park per se. It's a bit of an anomaly. It's a historic use that's been sort of grandfathered as it goes. The use continues today, and under the Planning Act, we do have to recognize it as a legal non-conforming use. Whether this application, the outcome of the application, regardless, that auto body shop may continue as a legal non-conforming use in perpetuity until it ceases.
Okay, thank you for answering those questions, and just a few quick comments to council about this. I appreciate staff and planning committee's work on this, but my concern still stands with the potential for using this or as a landing point for future industrial uses, for future growth going forward. We have to be pretty careful about protecting the nature of our communities, our residential communities, our rural communities, and there is a sense that in the rural area, and I've said this before, we get kind of the projects nobody else wants. And we want to make sure that we're just given a fair shake and that we're not going to be given a use or approving a use that will lead to future industrial development along there. I can understand where planning's coming from. It sounds like they're trying to protect the community, but I think perhaps I'm going to vote against this because I don't want it to grow, and I don't want to see these uses grow further. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McLaren.
Thank you. After the public meeting and the official passing of this through the planning committee, the neighbors brought to light what appears to be some new information that wasn't included in the report. I forwarded this information to Director Agnew and Ms. Vendetti, and they said that they would be able to answer certain questions today. I hope they've briefed you. The first question is centered around the subject lands in the report. Don't conform to the designation of an industrial zone. And in fact, the report only talks about changing the industrial zone, but it looks like the subject property, according to a document from the old Kingston Township, actually also includes residential and agricultural land in it. And it seems to me that that should have been taken into consideration. And the second one, the report claims that there are no outstanding issues with regards to environmental or anything like that from any other agencies. I've been told now that one of the wells there is contaminated and that this was not in their original report. Is there any answers to this at this time?
Ms. Forfer.
Through your worship to Councillor McLaren. I guess just to provide, I'm hoping I can provide some clarity for you. The official plan designation on the property is rural industrial, and the existing zoning is institutional. So there's an inconsistency between the two of them. The proposed zone would actually bring this property into conformity with the existing designation. I understand that there were three. I did get a copy of an excerpt from a report, and it appears that there were three different zones, as you had mentioned. Just for some clarity, there are some assumptions that are made, and one of those ones is certainly strap the dominant zone 2 property lines. It's sort of a standard practice when you're doing these sorts of things. I can't comment in the original report, but I can comment on our bylaw that was done a number of years ago, so that the current zone on the property bound is all institutional. It's not made up of 3 at the moment. In terms of the well contamination on the site, I have not got any information to provide that answer, other than it's a private well on that property, and as such it would be a matter to consider.
When you say it's a private matter to consider, is that new information that we should look into at all? Because new kind of industrial, we could be damaging the residential nearby, adjacent to residential nearby's water sources.
Through your worship to Councillor McLaren, the change in the proposed uses from the original 2012 proposal to the current one, the number of uses that were proposed do not have a sing aquifer, meaning that they don't have a high water volume demand. 2 wells on the property were deemed to be satisfied to service the new uses. The applicants and the property owners are responsible for the maintenance of their wells in this particular instance.
Thank you. Next on my list is Councillor George.
Thank you, Your Worship. I totally I agree with his comments in regards to what exists today. And what I find land for some purpose other than what was currently there for future consideration, or they would have zoned it in like industrial or whatever at that time, which they chose not to do. So there was obviously some consideration by the former politicians and which was just brought into play a few years ago to what the zoning has been since 1976. Makes me wonder, did somebody take an eye and misinterpret and and got put into the official plan as potential industrial lands when it really shouldn't be? Because I think this council has really been looking at industrial employment lands being south of the 401, not north of the 401. So I have a problem supporting this application, but at the end of the day, it's council's decision. Do we feel that it's an appropriate use of those lands, the original intent? But this particular one, I don't really favor the location, so I will be non-supportive of the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Schell.
Staff, what would be the result if there was a negative vote this evening? Would the applicant then simply revert to what the zoning is currently and be able to continue their business as it is today, or not? Thank you.
Commissioner Hurl.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, our understanding and information would indicate to us that the applicant would most likely appeal the decision of council.
But he would be able to continue his business while before the appeal was heard.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, sorry, I didn't understand the full question. Yes, he would be able to do that.
Just to confirm, he's not asking to substantially increase the business that's there. Is that a fair comment?
Ms. Forfar.
Through your worship to Councillor Schell, the existing auto body shop, through the zoning bylaw amendment, we've actually proposed and they've agreed to limit it to the existing size of the structure in the operation today to prevent any future expansion of that auto body shop on site. The only way that they could expand is to come forward with an additional application to again rezone the property to increase that in the future. They cannot do it as of right.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Stroud.
Thank you, Worship. In the event of a negative vote and the Tomlinson going forward with an appeal, in staff's opinion, would council have a clear rationale in the staff report to justify the refusal, and would it be actually to a legal question? But would it...
So I think that's a question for legal staff. Ms. Nicholson, do you have any response on that, or is that something that you would want to talk to council in closed session about?
Mr. Mayor, I apologize, but would you be able to repeat the question, or would the councillor be able to repeat the question for me, please?
Sure. Deputy Mayor Stroud.
In the event of an appeal because of a negative vote here.
With respect to an interpretation on whether or not sufficient rationale has been provided, but would advise that council does need to provide rationale.
2012 and now this new one in 2015. With this new one, the mobile carpet cleaning and the truck maintenance depot is off the table. Is that correct?
Ms. Horfer?
Through your worship to Councillor Sonic, yes it is.
Great. I do want to comment on the information report. It really clarified things, so I'm glad I have that understanding, and thanks very much for the information report. Now knowing that this application that they brought forward in 2015 is just the existing automobile body shop plus the storage units and open storage, I have a lot less concerns than even I did at Planning Committee when I didn't fully understand until we got this information report on the addeds. So with that, have as much concern as I did at Planning Committee, because the big thing for me was contamination of the groundwater, and with knowing that it's just going to be self-storage units, open storage, and the existing body shop that's been in existence since the 1970s, I don't have that fear anymore, so thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Okay. Any further comments from staff? No. Ms. Nicholson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for the, appreciate the delay. I would advise that if council wishes to have further discussion on the rationale and planning-based rationale, that we would have those discussions, that would have that discussion in closed session, and would provide that advice to council at this point.
Is that a discussion that you're prepared to have tonight, or would it be preferable to defer to our next meeting?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we would prefer to defer so we'd have an opportunity to do same.
Okay. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Councillor Hutchison.
Oh, I got a question. You might want to stop me halfway through, okay? So, just to warn you. This is the recommendation of staff from the planning department. So if we reject it and it's appealed to the OMB, our staff will have to testify against our decision, correct? Okay, well, that says something to me about how I'll vote on any motion to defer. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bone.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, I'd like to move a motion to defer to the next council meeting so that we can have a discussion in closed session about this.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor to defer. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor McLaren. So this is a motion to defer to the next council meeting so that there can be a discussion, further discussion and input with staff in closed session. Debate is with respect to time or place. Councillor Neal.
I understand we can also ask for clarification as to what the purpose or the rationale for the deferral is.
So I think that has been given by the mover, that this is to allow for further discussion with legal staff in closed session.
Okay.
So that I think is pretty clear. That's what the purpose is. Further debate with respect to time or place? Councillor Neal?
No, I was just hoping that there'd be some consideration of what Councillor Stroud Rose commented on, which was the need for some rationale.
Okay, so again, debate is with respect to time or place. Point taken. Seeing no other comment, we will call the vote on the motion to defer. Please vote now. And that carries by a vote of 12 to 1. Okay, moving on to report number 102 from the Arts, Recreation, and Community Policies Committee.
Excuse me, Mayor Patterson, we have an edit of another planning.
We do. It's actually listed as report number 104, so I will get to it in order. Thank you. Report 102 from ARC.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's my pleasure as Chair of ARC to present report number 102 of the Arts, Recreation, and Community Policies Committee for consideration by Council.
It's moved by Councillor Hutchison, seconded by Councillor Osanek. The report number 102 from the Arts, Recreation, and Community Policies Committee be received and adopted.
So there are two clauses. Would anyone like them separated? Councillor Schell would like them separated, so we will just do them one by one. So number one is the Arts Advisory Committee membership diversity. So we will call the vote. Oh, Councillor Schell, yes.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. I have a question on what does confidential voluntary disclosure mean, please?
Who can answer that? Yes, Deputy Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Schell. It's a form that we have on our website that's a voluntary form that applicants to committees and boards and commissions can fill out that would disclose their some of their sex or their maybe they have a disability, so they can disclose those types of statistics that we would be using as staff to indicate how well the recruitment process would be done. It'd be voluntary, and the disclosure would be done in a private setting, and we would then report the statistics out to the Nominations Advisory Committee. So that's basically what it is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thank you. I just, I'm on the Arts, Recreation, and Community Policies Committee, and I just wanted to say, like, this is it's an inclusive way. The folks on the nominations committee, and the clerk can correct me if I'm wrong, don't get specific data to specific applications. We just get a general sense to be sure that we're being inclusive in our reach and what we're attracting. We don't know who meets that criteria specifically. That's just, it goes into general statistics, and I believe that's the case. And so that just helps us understand who we're engaging and who we're bringing in so that we can continue to diversify and be inclusive in our nominations pool.
Thank you. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to first offer my thanks to the members of the committee, Arts Advisory Committee, for bringing this initiative forward. It came to ARC and it's been amended slightly in order to reflect what was the intent, simply to have the Arts Advisory Committee is making recommendations that go into the policy that we use that informs the development of cultural services and the work that takes place there. So when we're talking about diversity, it's not a matter of a quota system or anything like that. It's a matter of bringing in perspectives to reflect the diverse culture of the city. So I think it's a really important initiative, and I'm very, very grateful to the committee for bringing it forward. Thank you.
Thank you. So we will call the vote. And that carries. Item 2 is the public art policy. We'll call the vote. And that carries. Report 103 from the Environment, Infrastructure, and Transportation Policies Committee.
I'd like to submit report number 103 of EITP, duly moved and seconded. And I'll raise my hand afterwards. Thank you.
It's moved by Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor Allen. The report number 103 from the Environment, Infrastructure and Transportation Policies Committee be received and adopted.
So there are 3 clauses. Would anyone like them separated? Councillor Neal?
I'd like to separate clause 1.
Okay, so item 1 has been separated. Seeing no other separations, Councillor Neal, 2015 Kingston Transportation Master Plan.
Thank you. Clause 1, report 103, I believe the clerk has moved and seconded amendment to defer this to our next meeting. The lead staff person on this, Mr. Van Buren, is away tonight. He requested that this be bumped. I mentioned to Mr. Keach earlier, I told him he could be in the hot seat. He said he'd be happy to phone Utilities Kingston to turn off the lights if that was the case. So that was a good punchline, I had to share it. So I think it would be a good thing if we could defer this.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, moved by Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor Allen, to defer to our next meeting. Debate is with respect to time or place. Seeing no comments, we will call the vote on the motion to defer. And that carries. Item number 2 is frozen water services. Item number 3 is snow clearing for Canada Post in the City of Kingston. We'll call the vote. And that carries. Report number 104 from Planning Committee.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. Just get too eager to give these reports. I'm pleased to present number 104 of the Planning Committee and ask that it be received and adopted. Thank you.
So it's moved by Councillor Schell, seconded by Councillor Osanik. The report number 104 of the Planning Committee be received and adopted.
So there is just the one clause, application for zoning bylaw amendment, secondary suites pilot project area. Are there any comments? Okay, seeing none. Councillor Neal?
Yes, I know that we had an opportunity to discuss this from a legal perspective, but I have a couple of questions of staff, if I can. It's my understanding that there's one development proposal that came in based upon the existing zoning at the time, that when it was prior to this secondary suites zoning amendment, it gave them the ability by right to have secondary suites. And that proposal came in to the city, and now we're withdrawing that by right with this. So in a way, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's a kind of retroactively withdrawing a privilege that the applicant in good faith felt that they had at the time of their, when they brought their proposal forward. Could planning staff comment on the accuracy of my understanding of any or all of that?
Who would like to take that? Commissioner Hurdle?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. So I obviously won't get into some of the conversations that have taken place in closed session, but I will indicate that the application that we have received in terms of anything that's currently under progress, the planning application itself was for single-family homes. Granted that at the time there was the zoning in place to allow for secondary suite as of right, but the application that we have received and so far the building permits that we have received are for single family homes.
Yes, and just for further clarification, the protocol, as I understand it, is that an applicant will come to zoning to get a preliminary information on a file. They'll request that information. They may very well mention that their intention is to include secondary suite in the build-out, and that they may but at that point in time, they're not able to get the secondary suite approval, even if it is, as I understand it was at this time, a by right application, that they have to wait for the occupancy permit. So that it strikes me as a bit of a catch-22.
Commissioner Hurdle?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so I think we need some clarification between secondary suites and potentially duplexes because they're different. So the reason why the secondary suites are structured the way they are is because they're actually a secondary unit in a principal home. And that is why somebody needs to first build a principal home in order to be able to apply for a permit to add a unit within that principal home. Somebody can't come in and apply for 2 units at the same time because that's not necessarily a secondary suite at that point. What we're talking about is looking at 2 units, so more of a duplex situation, but you need to have an actual home built with occupancy to come in with your application for a secondary suite to build that additional unit inside your primary home.
I appreciate the rationale for that totally, and I understood that from the beginning, but my point is that a particular developer had a proposal, as I understand it, with 8 units, proposed to build 4 more, with the understanding that he would indeed by right be able to build. So I'm assuming that he probably had a business plan that worked from that assumption from the zoning at the time that he put in his building, his proposal and building, seeking a building permit. Since then, we've altered the zoning to take away that for right, and so now that person, that developer, has lost the right to develop those 4 units. Is that accurate?
Commissioner Hurdle?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So there is a developer that has come in and has obtained permits to build single-family homes. That particular developer has indicated its intent to add secondary suites once these homes have been completed to occupancy. Having said that, we can't work with just the intent. Obviously, we see changes in proposals that builders have on a regular basis. They intend to do something and they come back to us with something different. So we can't make the assumption that that's what's going to happen, and we don't issue permits obviously based on assumptions. We can only issue permits once we've received the actual request. So in terms of information that we have, we know that there's an intent, but we have obviously not at this point received a request to add in a secondary suite.
I appreciate and understand that. If there is a seconder, and I have it in my head, I just have to jot it down because I didn't intend in advance to bring forward an amendment, but I would like to amend the report in order to grandparent in the request for a building permit for the four units. That's the intent of my amendment. Before I write it down, if I could see if there's a willing seconder.
So Councillor Neal, you're proposing an amendment to grandfather these four existing units. I'm going to guess that's a fairly technical amendment. Do you have that amendment in writing? I know you said that you just need a moment to prepare it. I don't think that we can prepare that off the top of our heads. Do we have that amendment in writing?
I can, in 1 minute, I can jot it down because it's not a very complex amendment.
Mr. Mayor, we had prepared some information in anticipation that council may choose to make some amendments. So we do have some information prepared that the clerk could provide to council.
Okay. So we have an amendment prepared that is in the spirit of what Councillor Neal is proposing. So that's what I wanted to clarify. This is very technical. Is there a seconder? It's been moved by Councillor Neal. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Schell. Can we see the amendment?
I feel so much smarter reading my amendment now.
I don't think you could have jotted that down in 1 minute. So. Okay. Okay, so just to confirm, can I just get an indication from staff that in plain language, this essentially is an amendment that would grandfather those four units? Commissioner Hurdle?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, it is.
Okay, so there's an amendment on the floor. Councillor Neal, you can speak to it.
Thank you. Just again, I always find it troubling when there are retroactive laws or regulations that are brought in that catch people unawares. It's my understanding that in good faith, a developer came to us with a business plan, I'm sure, seeking funding probably from a mortgage company to do a development in which his plan was to have secondary suites in these 4 units. We, because of a kind of, and I know the rationale and I recognize the rationale for the difference between a duplex and a secondary suite and not allowing a secondary suite by right to happen until there's occupancy, because by its definition it isn't a secondary suite then. But I believe strongly that we should respect when somebody in good faith brings forward a proposal that they aren't going to get torpedoed by a change in a zoning allowance that withdraws their opportunity to build as they had planned in good faith to build. So I hope that council can support this grandparenting in of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak to the amendment? Deputy Mayor Stroud.
Thank you, Your Worship. I understand what Councillor Neal is saying here. I just don't agree. I don't think that the city promised this developer anything at the time that the first permits were issued. I think the developer had something in mind, probably. But every developer must know the element of risk that is involved, and the municipality was, we've been told by staff, was well within, zoning rules change and the reason for this zoning change was very clearly stated, and I think it's justified. And I think that sometimes you don't get the bonus units. The way I look at this is secondary suites that are built as a new build before the permit is obtained. If the physical building is done before the permit is obtained, that building method pays off when you get the secondary suite. But in this case, it didn't work out. But that's the element of risk that's involved when you're a developer. This decision, if we go forward with this amendment, will impact other parties. So, you know, one side wins, another side loses, and I think I'd rather go with the recommendation of staff on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sanik.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't support this amendment because if this developer does go forward with a secondary suite application based on how the other 4 homes in that area have been built, it's not the intent of what our secondary suite policy was. This is basically surplus 4 homes when they haven't even applied for the secondary suite status. I don't agree with. It's basically duplexes, except half of the houses 40%, half of the houses 60%. I don't agree with this. Thank you.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, I've thought about this, and I agree with Councillor Stroud and Councillor Osanik that the purpose of the secondary suites program was to take existing capacity that already existed in the built form, where a home that once maybe held a family of 4 or 5 now has 1 or 2 people, and they needed to maybe create another revenue stream with the benefit of affordable housing on the side of it. What we're seeing with these proposals here is new builds for that purpose, and I don't think that meets the extent of what we're trying to do with affordable housing and with the secondary. Creating new builds for the purpose of a secondary purpose doesn't seem in line with the policy, and so I won't support this amendment either.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Stroud, would you take the chair, please?
I take the chair, Your Worship, and I recognize you.
Thank you. I've certainly been interested to hear the comments so far on this amendment. I think that we're all in agreement that because of the servicing information that has come forward, that it makes sense to remove the Westbrook area from the secondary suite pilot program. The issue that we are grappling with right now is where do we draw that line? So at what point do you pass the point where you can squeak through and still be able to continue? And at what point is it fair to just drop the gate on everybody? And I think that the concern that I have is that this amendment is based on an intent. We have a developer that we think probably had a business plan that probably wanted to install secondary suites. But that's very challenging because the moment that we open our decision-making process up to intent, we don't know who else might have an intent to do something else in that area. And I think that to be fair, we should to be transparent, so to speak, that we really should go based on the concrete evidence and information that is ahead of us. And so right now, we do not have any applications for those secondary suites. So I think that the fairest thing to do is in fact to go with the original recommendation. So I am also going to be voting against the amendment. Thank you very much.
And you may have the chair back.
Thank you. Next on my list is Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. And I think that a few people are struggling with this because we also want to be fair here, but at the same time, exactly what the mayor said is we were dealing with something where somebody had an intent, and originally I guess there were 8 properties and 4 have been built, and now 4 are in the process of being built, but the applications have not actually come forward for a secondary suite. So in this instance, I guess fair in my mind is, you know, the 4 that are already there with the applications are going to be left alone. The 4 that are coming forward are just going to be single dwellings. And as far as the secondary suite, as Councillor Allen mentioned, basically, you know, the whole idea of this was not to allow, I guess, developers in new areas to essentially come in and, you know, leverage that as part of the development to say, hey, you know, this is a new type of house and we're going to be a secondary suite. It was to sort of build it into existing places. So because of that, I don't think I'll be able to support this amendment either, which is kind of, I guess, different than what I was thinking originally on this. But with new information from staff and everything, I think the thing is we want to be fair, but at the same time, what precedent are we setting every time we make a bylaw amendment or anything going into the future as well? Where do we close the gate? Where do we shut the door in the future? So, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Camden.
Thank you, through your worship. This is a really difficult decision on my end. I feel like the secondary suite issue is really similar to the solar issue that we just had, where we say to ourselves, we want affordable housing units, and we want to invest in these types of things, but we're just not really exactly sure how to do it. In this case, it would appear to me as though we may not be able to do it because of the servicing issues, and for that reason, I'm going to vote against the amendment reluctantly. But I do think it's important to note that there's other areas in the city, the area behind Rona, and those types of areas where there are secondary suites being built on new construction, where there is servicing, and they are kind of facilitating kind of the affordable housing concept that we're pushing for and we need. So I'm going to be voting against the amendment based on the servicing issue, but I do think it's important to know that we still do have an affordable housing issue that we kind of need all hands on deck on that moving forward.
Thank you. Anybody else to the amendment? Councillor Schell.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. I'm glad we're having this discussion about secondary suites because it is such a new topic, and we have run up against a roadblock. I'm prepared to vote against this based on the servicing issue that was brought up by staff, but that doesn't change the fact that I'm very much in support of secondary suites in general, because I think they have created for many people the ability to own a home that they might not have otherwise, or renovate it to create an apartment so that again they can hang on to their home as they've aged. But I will vote against it based on the servicing issue alone. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Turner.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. It is a difficult issue. I agree with a lot of the other councillors here, and I think that secondary suites are necessary. But in this issue, the servicing is a big issue, and that alone I agree with this. But I think going into the future, we just need to set the rules and make sure that we know what the secondary suite is, how they're progressing forward, and to look at the infrastructure and around it and the subdivisions that we're putting them in, and to look at the intensification too, that we do it within our own districts. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else to the amendment? Neil, you have the last word.
Thank you. Just quickly, I wanted to correct a couple of things. One, with duplex and a secondary suite, and would these indeed have met the criteria as secondary suites?
Commissioner Hurdle.
So through Mr. Mayor, we have criteria and policies in regards to secondary suite, but one of the, I think the most significant one that we have would be the size of the actual floor space. So the secondary suite cannot exceed 40% of the total floor space of a criteria that we have in terms of separate entrances and all those kinds of things we have laid out. They would be considered secondary suites.
Thank you very much. And the other thing is, there were a couple of comments about how the intent should be secondary suites as renovations, not in new builds. I think we would need, we seem to be losing the lights. I think we would need new regulations, because indeed part of our attempt to get more affordable housing in the city indeed is a very aggressive secondary suites policy that has large swaths of new build areas in the city that indeed are exactly that. Perhaps staff can comment on that as part of our affordable housing policy.
Commissioner Hurdle.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do have secondary suites that are actually built in newer builds, so there's no doubt about that. Where those are happening and going through simply a building permit application is where we have servicing capacity, and they're within those zones of as of right because of the servicing capacity. So the reason why we're having the conversation we're having today, and we did bring this amendment forward, is because that area is challenged in terms of servicing.
Thank you very much. And I think I'm not going to throw myself on my sword over this issue. And I believe, Councillor Stroud, that the translation of what he said is, Neil is smart but wrong. So, thank you.
So with those famous last words, we will call the vote on the motion to amend. Please vote. And that loses by a vote of 1 to 11. On the motion as not amended, anybody that has not spoken, so Councillor Neil has spoken. Councillor Al.
I'd love to just ask staff, when we discovered that we had this service capacity issue, why did Westbrook become included in the program in the first place? I'm assuming the service capacity issue already existed.
Who would like to take that? Commissioner Hurdle.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So Westbrook is actually through the township prior to amalgamation was included in the urban boundaries. So with that in mind, obviously at that time, the density targets were quite different than what we have implemented today in our official plan. And secondary suite wasn't obviously on the books in terms of the type of housing that people were looking at. But at the time that the Township Council made a decision to include that area in the urban boundary and provided servicing to that area, and therefore, with that in mind, we have to, if we get an application, we have to consider it within what's currently existing in the official plan.
Just to follow up on that, do we have a secondary plan or a community plan for the Westbrook area? And if so, would we have gone to the level of understanding the servicing requirements for that level in that case?
Commissioner Hurdle.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So there is a community plan for Westbrook, and I'm not exactly 100% sure on this one, but I believe the densities that we were looking at that time were quite different again than what our current OP states in terms of the density targets that we have. So the servicing capacity would have been based on the intended densities that were being proposed way back when it was included in the official plan and when the community plan was put together.
This would be to Mr. Keach. What would it take to bring our servicing capacity up to the standard that we expect in our official plan within our urban boundary?
Mr. Keach.
Through your worship, I'll answer the question generally. I don't have the specifics, the numbers and whatnot, but there are, so we're talking sewage capacity here, just I need to point that out. There are two limiting factors currently. One is the pumping station and one is the force main that runs from the pumping station towards the central plant facilities. There are currently plans in place to increase the capacity of the pumping station up to basically the capacity of the trunk sewer. And that was in the capital plan that council approved at budget time last year. And we're talking millions of dollars, but not tens of millions of dollars, that the number escapes me at the moment, to do the other part of it, which would be the force main. Now we're into tens or several tens of $1 million to make that happen. Just as kind of an off-the-cuff comment. it would be a fairly big, expensive and intrusive undertaking, because you would either have to replace the force main that's there now that would go through a number of built-up areas, or twin the force main, so it would be quite a extensive project.
Thank you. With that information and with the conversation, I'm also happy to support the entire recommendation, which actually expands the program to more of Kingston. So our debate has been addressing primarily the Westbrook area, but we do see some increase of the ability in the rural area with a holding provision, because we have to provide our own servicing in the rural area, and so we have to make sure our septics can handle that. So I'm excited to provide opportunities in the rural area for affordable housing, secondary suites throughout the city, and also in the East End we'll be expanding the as of right, so that will be a great benefit to our city and to our affordable housing program as we grow.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments, we will call the vote on the motion. Please vote. And that carries. Report number 105 from the Municipal Heritage Committee.
Thank you, Your Worship. I rise with report number 105 from the Municipal Heritage Committee, and I ask that Council receive and adopt it.
It's moved by Councillor Stroud, seconded by Councillor Schell. Report number 105 from the Municipal Heritage Committee received and adopted.
So there's just the one item, the application for heritage permit under the Ontario Heritage Act 218 Green Bay Road. Is there anyone that wishes to speak to it? Councillor Schell.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. I might as well start. I was at the meeting yesterday, and I've been through all the meetings about this building. What started as an agreement for renovation, some tear down, and agreement to a much bigger house, but keeping the red brick house back in July. So that was passed by council. So we had agreed to quite a few changes to this house. And then what came back was an engineer's report that the foundation needed to be underpinned. What was very confusing about all this, and really did get cleared up a lot yesterday, was that the brick is fine, the actual structure of the building is fine, it's the foundation, and I guess I have one. Houses with limestone foundations are often only 2 feet deep. That's what they did back then. And it's also very close to the water. It's a gorgeous lot. And this house is very, very low, probably the lowest one in Berryfield. So the debate was brisk and difficult. The whole decision is very difficult, because we do have on one side a beautiful heritage home. We're not allowed, I was told yesterday, to discuss or take into account costs, because you can probably get 6 different quotes for this underpinning. I noticed the engineer with a stamped quote said 200 to 250. The owners have a rebuild. I mean, we just don't know. So it's really, I think most of us fell to 50-50. Berryfield made a presentation tonight. Please don't allow this to happen. A number of other professionals have said, let it happen. So I think what I'm basically saying is we'll all have to make up our own mind, because this was such a very difficult one. It's got a real, there's no clear indication on this one of what we should or should not do. In my opinion, we have, as I say, professional staff, and we have others who love Berryfield, and we know what the Berryfield concept in it if we vote to save it. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Holland.
However, I think that staff's recommendation here is reasonable. I think the location of this home is the most important factor, and the fact is it's in an area where 99% of the city of Kingston will never know it exists or wander by it. Which is not to say that wandering through Berryfield is not a lovely thing to do, but if it were Summerhill, for example, I would feel a lot differently. I think the fact is this is a private home. While there is this suggestion that the homeowner should have been aware of all this costs associated, I think any homeowner is aware that owning a home comes with it a great deal of liability. And I just don't think in this case it is reasonable to expect anything other than what we're being told, which is that this property ought to be enhanced and rebuilt in this way for future generations. And that built heritage and having tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars tied up in bricks and mortar is not always what is in the best interest of the public. So for that reason, I will be voting for the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, and just to provide that clarity, the recommendation that is before us does say that the application be denied. So it's just to make it clear that you know if you vote yes to this, that you're voting in favor of denying the permission to demolish, subject to these conditions. If you vote against it, then there's an opportunity to put something else forward. Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. This one's actually, obviously everybody knows Berryfield is a very sensitive area. So last night we were actually at a meeting, Councillor Stroud was there, sorry, Deputy Mayor Stroud was there as well. And it has to do with the update of the Heritage Conservation District Plan. And essentially that's the guiding document that essentially protects the heritage of the Berryfield District. So I think a lot of the concerns around this one, and if we just take money to the side, in the heritage area, it's going to be expensive to do anything. Saving heritage is always going to be expensive. That's just something that, as we go forward, you're trying to save something, there's special ways to build it. It's going to be more expensive because you have to maintain what you're building around. The whole idea of last night, though, was the strengthening of this plan in the sense that how do we prevent this sort of creep from happening? And, Councillor Allen kind of alluded to it earlier when once one thing's sort of allowed, it kind of provides that sort of, precedent to say, well, if we've done it here, then next is the next application, or there's a property down the road, and all of a sudden you start to have what is the fear of most people in the village, I believe, is that you have an inherent underpinning of a changing of this sort of area. And it starts slowly, but over time it gains speed, and each one that you kind of allow just sort of snowballs and then grows. So this is something where I do understand the concern of the homeowner and the costs associated with this, but at the same time, allowing a heritage property in this specific district, and we've made these districts knowingly. I mean, I believe the Berryfield district was actually the first one in all of Ontario to get that Heritage Conservation District designation. So I mean, that in itself is substantial, and recognizing that and protecting it. My concern with this is if it happens once and then there's another house that's kind of left, to sort of, as people are aging, they can't maintain it to the same level, and it gets to this point, then in the future, we've now set that precedent. So this is something where going into a home, buying it, there should have been that full disclosure that, there's home inspections, there's all these things along the way that would kind of prepare you for the costs associated with obtaining, restoring, and maintaining and living in a home in a heritage district. So with that in mind, I'm basically going to support the recommendation to not allow the application, if that didn't confuse everybody how I said that. So thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Deputy Mayor Stroud.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I'd like to thank Councillor Bohm for his comments. He is the district councillor for Berryfield, and I think that's significant. I know that we have a tradition here that, we think twice before we go against the recommendation of the district councillor, because he has spoken to the residents of Berryfield about this and knows the will of the community. To get back to what Councillor Schell very nicely summed up the situation, and I agree with everything that she said, it is a true dilemma. This is a dilemma because there's strong points on both sides, and you're forced to choose between two outcomes, and each one has consequences for the other side. So what is our role in that? Clearly my role as chair of the Heritage Committee is to protect heritage. It's in the strategic plan, our new strategic plan. It's very important to the people of my district. I live in the Sydenham Heritage Conservation District, and I'm told on the street there, this was actually quite a hot topic in my area too, because the word got out about this leaky foundation or the crack in the foundation, and I've heard several times commented that is actually probably the case in many of these heritage homes that people are living in. Unfortunately, we had a situation here where the owners hired an engineer, and an engineer is a professional. Once he goes in, he finds a structural problem, he's bound by his profession to disclose it. And then that set in motion the whole thing that we see here, where we're stuck with this dilemma. This house stood there for 130 years on a floodplain and survived, when other houses maybe around Berryfield didn't, because there are many new builds as well. I think at the end, the reason, and we took a long time with this, it was deferred twice at Heritage Committee. The reason that Heritage Committee ended up 8-2 in favor of this recommendation to deny the demolition is because, although it's expensive, it's worth it to save this particular house. It's the last standing heritage brick house in Green Bay. It's the house on the swamp. It's a bit of a marvel that it's there, and that I think if we can save it, we ought to save it. And I don't know if maybe the Berryfield Village can start a fundraising drive to help defray the costs of repairing the foundation. Also, maybe get a builder in there that has experience with limestone foundations. It could be actually a lot less costly than what is estimated, and that is my hope. So reluctantly, again, I agree with Councillor Bohm, the District Councillor, to support the recommendation of the Heritage Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to the committee. It's really interesting that when you move to a new neighborhood and you don't know what the expectations are. We have that sometimes in the rural area. I've heard legend that we used to give out pamphlets to folks being like, so you're moving to the rural area. There's going to be some smells you don't recognize. There's going to be some ways of life that look a little different than in the urban area. And I think we might want to think about encouraging our neighborhoods that want to preserve that character to help introduce our neighbors to what those expectations should be. It's probably not our job as a city, but maybe the community associations should consider that. This has sort of been presented to us as a black and white decision. And two options is sort of what's been put on the table. And I don't believe that that's the case. I don't believe that it has to be one way or the other. I think that there could be more work done to find a more cost-effective way to meet the standards of the neighborhood. And I think that that's probably why we need to turn this down, because I don't think we found that right suggestion in the application. I think the owner, I understand their intent, I understand what they're doing, and how they're trying to preserve that. But I think they may need to just take another look at their approach, consider our comments, consider the comments of the Heritage Committee, and take another approach and look at this in a new application that may better fit the expectations of the community and the high expectations we have in Kingston of maintaining our heritage. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Neal.
Thank you. I may be wrong, but it's my understanding that the Berryfield Village Heritage designation is the oldest heritage designation in Ontario. They were the trailblazers in bringing forward a plan, a formula that other communities have adopted, including the Sydenham district. So I think it's really important that we value and recognize that. I also understand that the owners came forward some months ago with a plan that received endorsement of the committee to do some substantial addition or redevelopment of that site, but that respected and protected the brick portion that is the most important heritage aspect of that site. And so I think at that time, both the owners and the Heritage Committee did exactly the job that they're expected to do. And that's find that middle ground compromise between protecting the heritage aspects of a building, but allowing people the ability to do some modernization or some addition to it. And that's exactly what happened and was approved and could have had a building permit already based upon that process. I said a few council meetings ago that in my 12 years on city council, I had never voted against a Heritage Committee recommendation, and I would always need very compelling reasons, and then I voted against a Heritage Committee recommendation at that time on that file. I can't support not supporting the Heritage Committee on this. Let me rephrase that. It's been a long day. I want to support the Heritage Committee on their recommendation that's before us, and so I'll be voting yes. And I'll try not to slip into tongues again. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other comments, we will call, Councillor George.
Thank you, Worship. I'm wearing this tonight because I'm proud to be Canadian, as one of our delegation spoke to earlier, which, as I understand it, the people that fought for us when we wear this is because we have freedom of speech, we have freedom to do just about anything we want to do when the policies allow us to do it. And when I read this report, and I read that the current policy, and I understand the concerns Councillor Bohm and others have in the room, but the current policy states, and it's right here in the document that the other presenter gave to us today and spoke to at the podium, says that the buildings are to be retained whenever possible. It doesn't say that they have to be. It's giving them options as to how they may retain that. And some of the options that our own heritage staff have brought forward in the recommendations have provided some options which I believe the applicant is more than willing to do. Now, we've heard about the erroneous cost, or the huge costs related to undermining or underpinning, whatever it is, in doing some of that work. And I think, you know, on the moral side of things, where do you draw the line that you start forcing people to spend their funds, retirement funds, whatever they may have, to enjoy what they bought? Even if they did do their due diligence buying it, we all know that we have our home inspections done and we rely on their comments as to what they find. But in this case, I think it was a little more difficult because it wasn't found out till some of the engineers went in and did a little more digging to find out just how bad the foundation on this particular building is. So I find it really difficult to say we're going to take away the right that these people may have, and what our current policy now says, they can basically do what's needed to retain what they can of this heritage structure. And I think the conditions that the Heritage Department people, our department, not the Heritage Committee, but our own department have put in place would allow them to do that, and I support that. I think if the Heritage Committee wants to start throwing out all kinds of stuff, then put your money where your mouth is and buy the properties from these people that you don't want them to reinvent or do something with. You know, it just seems that continually, we want to see our heritage, you know, maintained in the city of Kingston because, you know, we have a lot of it here, but at the end of the day, you know, we're kind of putting some heritage in place for future generations too. And to be able to have somebody who can say, well, I've taken some of what was 1885 structure reincorporated into something that now meets today's codes and allows me to live in a home that I feel safe in and my children can grow up and be safe in, then why are we taking that ability away from them? You know, and that's exactly what's happening here tonight with some of the speakers. And I just think it's ridiculous that we put ourselves in that position of denying people their rights. So I'm going to vote against the heritage recommendation, and then hopefully we can get a motion on the floor that mirrors what staff originally put forward, so that these folks can move forward with what they have as a vision for their heritage building that they purchased. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Stroud, will you take the chair?
I take the chair, Your Worship, and I recognize you.
Thank you. So I think that the way I see this issue, I think it's important that we are consistent. I do think that there are occasions where we may need to consider a demolition for a variety of different reasons, and we dealt with an issue not that long ago. It was a couple of months ago. It was the building at the corner of Princess and Wellington. Obviously, there was attempts to try to renovate and to restore it, but for a variety of different structural issues, we concluded that the best way forward was to demolish. But the key there is that we added a heritage easement agreement. And I think that that's key. So I want to make sure that we are being consistent. So can I just ask a question of staff? Why in this case do we not have the option of having a heritage easement agreement attached to the application to demolish?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm glad that you've asked the question, actually, because their comments that were made in terms of reference to the staff recommendation, and I want to make sure it's clear that what's in front of council tonight, all of the wording that's there, that's not a staff recommendation. That was not part of a staff report recommendation. That was a committee, Heritage Committee motion that was put together. The original staff recommendation, which was defeated by the committee on September 14 in the report, states that it is recommended to council that the application for the demolition of the designated heritage property at 218 Green Bay Road not be approved in the absence of a heritage easement agreement. And the reason why that was a recommendation, it's because it was very clear to us, and it was made clear as well at the committee meeting, that the property owner had no interest in entering into any heritage easement agreement with the city. So in terms of consistency and approach and trying to make sure that we retain the important heritage elements, we from a staff perspective felt that the demolition should not proceed unless there was a heritage easement agreement that could be put together.
Okay, and just a follow-up question, is it standard practice that if we do allow a demolition, so I refer to the previous property at the corner of Princess and Wellington, are there other examples where we permitted a demolition to take place together with a heritage easement agreement?
So, Mr. Mayor, the city has recently approved heritage easement agreement for 9 North Street and Bailey Broom Factory, understanding and knowing that obviously there would be significant alteration and possibly removal of portions of the buildings in that case. So we have those that have been approved in the last couple of years.
Okay, so I'm going to support the recommendation from the Heritage Committee, but for a different reason. Because I'm responding to what Councillor George has said, and I think he's right. I think that there are absolutely times where we need to be reasonable. That if it's incredibly expensive and incredibly difficult to restore a building, then there has to be that line. But the problem here is that we're not taking a consistent approach. So the only reason in this case where we should allow for that demolition is with that heritage easement agreement together with it. We don't have that. And so since we don't have that, it's not fair then to the other situations that we've dealt with in the past and other future applicants, that if they want to come forward with that demolition, there has to be that heritage easement agreement attached to it. So I think if we're going to be absolutely consistent, then we do need to support this and deny the application to demolish because of that missing piece. So thank you very much. Can I have the chair?
Thank you, Your Worship. You have the chair back.
Great. Thank you very much. Councillor Osanek.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have one question to staff, and that's about underpinning the foundation versus building a brand new foundation if there was demolition. I haven't really heard of underpinning a foundation before, and for this property, because it's so low-lying, it's right next to the water, if you underpin the existing foundation, will that make the foundation just as strong and crack-free and waterproof as if you build a brand new foundation in this day and age from scratch?
Commissioner Hurdle.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I will have to say that I'm not an engineer, and I unfortunately do not know the answer to that question.
So I think that is a consideration for this house, because whatever work is done to this house, whether it's the underpinning or a brand new structure, we want it to last another 200 years. We don't want the homeowners to have to come back in 20 years from now, 30 years from now to get more work done. And because this house is so close to the water and it can only be dug out 2 feet because of the water table, that's what they did before. Anyway, yeah, I would have liked to have been able to investigate it since it was just on the addeds tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak that has not already spoken? Councillor Camden.
Thank you. I wish to move a motion to defer until the next council meeting.
So there is a motion to defer to the next council meeting.
On the condition that we receive a heritage agreement.
Okay, so just a question to staff. Is this recommendation time sensitive?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, it is, and this is why it's in the addeds, actually, because we have 90 days to provide a response to this particular application, which the 90-day will expire on November 9th. If we do not, if council...
So I'm going to rule the motion to defer out of order simply because of that time sensitivity. Councillor Turner.
Okay. This motion was given to us today, so that doesn't give us a lot of time to read through this and make a decision on these people that have an exorbitant amount of money that they're going to have to put into a house. Like it's unfortunate. So is there any way we can change this or do something at this point in this conjuncture?
So I think that the issue is that it has been with the Heritage Committee for a period of months. So you only have 90 days in which to make a decision. And so as we've just heard from staff, that decision point is just days away. So we do have to make a decision. We've heard from staff that if we didn't, then the application would essentially be approved. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak that has not already spoken? There's only a couple people left. Okay. We will call the vote on the recommendation from the Heritage Committee. Councillor Hutchison.
I would like you to explain the voting again.
Okay.
Because I'm quite sure there are questions out here, because I've been hearing them.
So to clarify, we are voting on the recommendation from the Heritage Committee. The recommendation from the Heritage Committee says to deny the application to demolish. So if you vote yes, then you're confirming the denial of the application to demolish. If it passes, then we're done. If that loses, then there's an opportunity for us to put something else forward if we so desire. So with that, we will call the vote. And that carries by a vote of 10-3. So we have nothing from Committee of the Whole tonight. We do have an information report, which is supplemental information to the report dealing with the application for zoning bylaw amendment. Seeing no questions. No information reports from members of council. Miscellaneous business. Number 1, that as requested by Red Squirrel Conservation Services Kingston, Council proclaim November 23rd, 2015 as Radon Awareness Day in the City of Kingston. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Sanik, seconded by Councillor Schell. Please vote. And that carries. Number 2, that is requested by the Métis Nation of Ontario, Council approve the raising of the flag on November 16th, 2015 in Confederation Park and November 16th to the 23rd at Princess Street and Division Street in the City of Kingston. Moved by Councillor Allen, seconded by Councillor George. Please vote. And that carries. Number 3, that is requested by the Métis Nation of Ontario, Council proclaim November 16th, 2015 as Louis Riel Day in the City of Kingston. Moved by Councillor Allen, seconded by Councillor Neal. Please vote. Still one person to vote. And that carries. New motions. Number 1, moved by Councillor McLaren, seconded by Councillor Candon. Whereas equality is a respected Canadian value as conveyed and expressed through Canadian citizenship, which has conferred serious rights and responsibilities on all the members of our community equally and without discrimination. And whereas the Federal Bill C-24, Strengthening Canadian Citizenship Act, has created an unequal, two-tiered Canadian citizenship status which may weaken Canada's economic development potential by making Canada a less attractive destination for needed, highly educated and skilled immigrants. And whereas the City of Kingston, as a case of point, is headed for a skilled labor shortage starting in approximately 2021 and is in need of a highly educated and skilled immigration and in-migration, without which Kingston will experience a loss of economic development, a situation which may well be made worse by Bill C-24's citizenship legislation. And whereas Bill C-24 has some very problematic causes that could negatively impact both our community members and our national social fabric, including number 1, the possibility of citizenship revocation to Canadians who have the possibility of dual citizenship, Section 8 of Bill C-24, which amends Section 10 of the Act. Number 2, the creation of levels of citizenship rights with the accompanying second-class citizenship status, Section 8 of Bill C-24, which amends Section 10 of the Act. Number 3, the increased possibility and likelihood of creating stateless people, Section 8 of Bill C-24, which amends Section 10 of the Act. Number 4, the elimination of the right to a federal court hearing when citizenship revocation is administered. Number 5, the permitting of indefinite delays for citizenship applications. Number 6, barring citizenship to foreign nationals for crimes which may not be considered crimes in Canada. Number 7, reduced right of conferring citizenship from Canadian parents after the first generation to children born outside of Canada. Therefore, be it resolved that the City and Council of Kingston petition the federal government to reconsider Bill C-24 and its effects, and that the City and Council of Kingston add their voice to the people and institutions speaking against Bill C-24 by communicating to the new Prime Minister, the opposition party leaders, the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration, the opposition citizenship and immigration critics, and other municipalities in Ontario via the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, the above noted concerns expressed in this motion. Councillor McLaren.
Thank you. As most of you probably know, this came to me from Jimmy Hassan, who actually lives in my secondary's district, but his business is in my district, and he helped me to educate me on the ramifications of this particular bill. And one of the things that he did point out was a report that was done by the Canadian Bar Association and their expert legal teams, where we got this list of 7 problematic cases here. So the reason that we brought this forward now is because we have a new government that promised to do something about this, and as anybody who is human knows, when things are kept being brought up, you do something about them. So the hope here is that the new Liberal government will actually make life better for all of us, because these 7 things actually can affect me personally and a lot of us. So for example, in the first case, the possibility of citizenship revocation to Canadians who have the possibility of dual citizenship. I may be 4th generation on my father's side, but my mother was not born here, which means that I'm subject to this too. And then the second one, creating levels of citizenship. Apparently, legally, there's actually 4 levels of citizenship that this creates. 3, the increased possibility of creating stateless people. There is an actual case of this. One gentleman named Deepan Baduki, who apparently was born in Canada and has now been stateless because he made an error when he was younger. He cannot get a job, he cannot get health care, he is a stateless person in Canada. And this has been going on for about a year now. The elimination of federal court hearings when citizenship is administered. This is usually something that should be considered from an objective point of view, but this is putting it into the hands of the bureaucracy that have a vested interest in some cases. The permitting of indefinite delays for citizenship applications. I know that if you're coming to a new country and you want to start working, an indefinite delay can certainly put a dampener on that. Barring citizenship to foreign nationals for crimes that may not have been considered crimes in Canada. We benefited immensely from American draft dodgers that came to Canada during the Vietnam War. This would no longer be tolerated. And lastly, the reduction of right of conferring citizenship from Canadian parents to the first generation. I have 2 sons. One was born in Canada, one was not. If one of my sons leaves Canada to work abroad like I did and has another son there, one of them will be a Canadian, the other will not. That's an unfair law. So for these reasons, and thanks to Jimmy who educated me on this, I hope that you guys will consider sending this message to our new government. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Neal.
Thank you. This, I think, should be considered a very important motion. The reality is that, and I hope it sincerely that it passes unanimously, we have a number of pieces of legislation that have come over the last 4 or 5 years, and it's really unfortunate. This is one of them, and it really frustrates me that often they're given titles that are very Orwellian in the way that they're phrased. It's like it's out of the playbook of George W. Bush, I think, to call a bill Strengthening Canadian Citizenship Act when in fact it's taking away citizenship rights from a large number of Canadians. And I think we need to support this. I'm somewhat, and I know that the Prime Minister-elect has said, and I applaud him for this, but this too shall pass. But he says quite clearly that there shouldn't be masses of Canadians that are cases of legislation. And I'm sure that if this were tested, that we hear the voices of people like Jimmy Hassan, who has brought so much to our community, and we've identified our wish to attract more diverse. This law, if it remains in place, actually contradicts that whole point of view. So I'm very, very happy to support this, and I hope many or all of us are able to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Candon.
Thank you, through your worship. I'm sure we can all agree that when we get elected into council or become the mayor, we get to look at the world through a different lens, where we kind of get invited into different people's lives and different community groups invite you in to kind of show you their community and culture. And I too had Jimmy contact me and tell me how he felt, and he was always been somebody who has invited me and many others into his community. So it was certainly discouraging to hear him feel that he didn't feel invited or included. Obviously, with the new federal election, Canadians spoke and said that they wanted change. And I think that supporting this motion will show that you support these Canadian values that were recently demonstrated. And I think that it will also show that the City of Kingston is taking a bit of a leadership role in encouraging immigration and things of this nature, because as we know, we are going to rely on that a great deal in the future. So I think it sends the wrong message to alienate 99.9% of immigrants in the country, and I think it's a great leadership role to take to support this motion.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments, Councillor Turner.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Patterson. I'll support this motion. I think it's something that needs to be supported. If you look at clause number 4, the elimination of the right to a federal court hearing when citizenship revocation is administered, I think that's important that, that there's no judicial oversight and that everyone is allowed the right to due process. So in terms of that, I think, and also it does affect my family. My daughter was born in the U.S., so I think it's important that we do support this and send the message to the federal government. Thank you.
Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was approached by Councillor McLaren for support on this and some assistance in drafting it. And I thought, okay, it's a matter of civil rights. This is probably really important and worth supporting just on those grounds alone, until I looked at it more closely and saw the possibility of citizen revocation to Canadians who have a possibility of dual citizenship, and recognized that my father was born outside this country, in Scotland. My mother was born here, but he was not. Suddenly it all became a lot more personal. So I thank Jimmy Hassan and the two councillors for that. This is extremely important. The history of citizenship, starting with the French Revolution, is that people could be rendered stateless and have no rights. And it was only through that revolution and a series of other revolutions and rebellions, like the 1837 rebellion in Canada, where a couple of people were hung and people were exiled. So we're not quite the peaceable kingdom we sometimes think we are. That these rights have been established. You create a slippery slope with this kind of legislation, and it also tends to assume that some people are not going to be affected. They think they're not going to be affected because it's pointed rather underhandedly at a particular group who happen to be on the edge at the moment, which may not be the case in 20 years. It might be somebody else. And that's why we all have an interest in supporting this kind of motion and being against this kind of legislation, because we don't know who it's going to apply to or how it can be extended. So hopefully we pass this, the city and the new Liberal government has said they will look at it and probably, hopefully, revoke it. So I'm more than happy to vote for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Deputy Mayor Stroud.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't have much to say except that I find Bill C-24 incredibly hypocritical. Everyone in this room is descended directly from immigrants to this country. The only exception to that would be someone that's 100 councillors for this motion, which I will support.
Thank you. So we will call the vote. And that carries. Motion number 2, moved by Councillor Allen, seconded by Councillor Osanik. Whereas Tomlinson Environmental Services Limited has applied for a zoning bylaw amendment with the respect to the property located at 1660 to 1674 Sydenham Road for the purpose of establishing and operating a warehouse, self-storage facility, open storage, an automobile body shop, and an accessory dwelling unit on the subject lands. Whereas concern was expressed by residents at public meetings conducted August 2nd, 2012,
and for a revised application on May 7th, 2015 in respect to numerous site plan issues that may impact residential neighbors such as noise, water source protection, separation distance, and whereas the delegation of authority bylaw 2006-75 allows for council to bump up site plan control applications to planning committee, and whereas this procedure will provide transparency and allow the details to be debated in a public forum, therefore be it resolved that the site plan control application for 1660 to 1674 Sydenham Road by Tomlinson Environmental Services Limited be bumped up to the planning committee. Before we do that, just a quick question, if I can, to staff. Given that we've deferred a decision on the zoning for this particular property, are we still permitted to deal with the site plan issue? Can someone clarify that for me? Commissioner Hurdle?
Mr. Mayor, I think it would be preferable if this was deferred as well until council has made a final decision on the application.
So, Councillor Allen, this is your motion. Would you be so kind as to put forward a motion to defer that we could deal with this at the next meeting?
I would be happy to put forward a motion to defer so that we can consider its merits. And Councillor Bohm and the original seconder has also offered to do that.
So we have a motion to defer to the next meeting, moved by Councillor Allen, seconded by Councillor Bohm. Debate is with respect to time or place. I think it's self-evident. So we'll call the question. Please vote. And that carries. New motion number 3, moved by Councillor Allen, seconded by Councillor Holland. Whereas Kingston has been home to a number of successful marathon swimmers, including world record swimmer Vicky Keith, whose marathon feats include the first person to cross all 5 Great Lakes, the crossing of the English Channel, the circumnavigation of Sydney Harbour in Australia, as well as several crossings of Lake Ontario. And whereas Vicky Keith began her world record-breaking career as a marathon swimmer in Kingston, including the completion of a historic 80.2-kilometer butterfly stroke crossing of Lake Ontario, landing in Lake Ontario Park, and whereas Ms. Keith holds 16 world records and has received numerous awards for her impressive feats, inspiring many subsequent crossings of Lake Ontario by others from across our city, and whereas in 2015, Kingston City Council adopted a commemoration strategy which includes recommendations to encourage the celebration of both women and sport in the city of Kingston, therefore be it resolved that the city of Kingston accept the donation of the stone touched by Ms. Keith, signaling the completion of her 80.2-kilometer multiple world record-breaking crossing of Lake Ontario for inclusion in the launch of Kingston's commemorations process in 2016 in order to tell the stories of Vicky Keith along with Kingston's other commendable marathon swimmers. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Your Worship. Standing up feels great right now. I now understand why Councillor Stroud does it so often. But this motion speaks for itself. We have a commemoration strategy that we adopted this summer, and we're just, we haven't got it quite to the point of implementation. Ms. Keith needs to move the stone and put it somewhere, so if we're able to hold that until we can roll it into our commemoration strategy and implementation, that would be great. Rolling the stone may take all 12 or 13 of us, but we could do it with the mayor's strength at our side. So if council would just accommodate this request, it would be great. This stone was in Lake Ontario Park when she finished her swim, and so it is part of Kingston, literally. It is limestone, I believe, and it will, her goal offering this to me, she's a constituent of mine currently, and she just said she wanted to tell the stories of all of the swimmers. So it's not about herself. She wants to make sure that everyone who has crossed Lake Ontario, who is part of Kingston, who is part of those stories, is included in our conversations. And she thought that the rock would be a great, I know it feels a bit funny with it being a rock, but it is a great rock to tell these stories with. So with the pleasure of council, we can take this stone and implement it as part of our commemoration strategy next year. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, we will call the vote.
And that carries. Are there any notices of motion to present tonight? Seeing none, minutes. Mr. Clerk. Mr. Clerk, Mr. Deputy Clerk.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. If I may, I don't know if this is a point of order or something, but I'd like to suggest a motion to reconsider something that we've done tonight.
So a motion to reconsider is in order. What would you like to reconsider?
I'd like to consider that Clause 1 from Report 105 from the Municipal Heritage Committee be reconsidered in order to debate the merits of the original staff recommendation as part of the report.
Okay, so there's the report from the adits. So we have a motion of reconsideration that's been put forward by Councillor Allen to reconsider. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Turner. Can you just read that? Do you have that in writing? Does the clerk have that? Okay, we're just going to take a moment because I think it's important to get that up on the screen so we understand exactly what it is that we're doing. So, just after conferring with the clerk, a motion to reconsider is very straight language. It's just simply that the previous motion be reconsidered. So we don't actually need that on the screen. If the motion to reconsider passes, then Councillor Allen will have the floor in which to argue why we should take a different course from what we took tonight. So no pressure, Councillor Allen. So based on that, we will call the vote on the motion to reconsider. Just a reminder that when the motion to reconsideration is in the same meeting, it only requires a simple majority to pass. So we will call the vote on the motion to reconsider.
Point of order. This happens so infrequently. Is it my understanding that the mover is given an opportunity, a set time to pitch their case, if you will, and that it isn't debatable after that? Is that correct?
So that's correct. Yes. So, Councillor Allen, you can have, I don't think it's a minute, I think it's just a reasonable amount of time to just simply tell us what the rationale is for why you want us to reconsider the previous motion.
I'll be quick. We were debating the Heritage Committee recommendation primarily. We didn't really consider the staff recommendation as part of that went to Heritage Committee. Many of us were looking for another option or a middle ground or a way for the city to work with the owner to achieve our heritage requirements. And I think that we should consider what the staff recommendation is here at the top of the report that we have and the merits of that. Before we totally deny this, we can give them a chance, and we need to do it because it's time sensitive. So, sorry to keep you here later.
Okay, and we just confirmed that Councillor Allen is eligible to move the motion of reconsideration because he voted in the affirmative. So just in case there's any confusion there. So with that, we will call the question on the motion to reconsider. Still one person to vote. And that carries by a vote of 9-4. So the motion from the Heritage Committee is now back on the floor. So, Councillor Allen.
Thank you. And I've already made my pitch, so I'll keep this brief as well. I think that we were looking for, in the mayor's comments before, he was looking for something with an easement agreement or something consistent with what we've done in the past. I was looking for something that wasn't black and white with the demolition and the specifics that were associated with the demolition. I thought there was a third way we could do this. That could be negotiated in an easement agreement, where we might be able to find a way to meet the expectations of the community, and also provide the owner with some avenue to move forward with their project. So I thought it was worth debating that language, because we may have kind of glossed over it in terms of looking at the rest of the language of the recommendation from the committee.
Okay, so just to clarify, so we are now...
So I'd like to make a motion to amend the report to the recommendation to be the original recommendation from staff.
Okay, so just conferring with the clerk, the way that this would need to happen is that we would need to vote down this recommendation. And then there would be an opportunity for you or another member of council to put forward an alternative recommendation which would allow the application for demolition subject to a heritage easement agreement, which was the original recommendation that came from staff. Okay? So that is the mechanism. But because the motion's on the floor, it's now debatable. So right now we are just having a debate on whether or not to accept or to defeat the original motion. So next on my list then is Deputy Mayor Stroud.
Okay, so just to clarify, we're talking about the same thing we talked about already tonight?
Yes.
So we're just going back and to the same?
So we are back. The only thing that has changed is that Councillor Allen has indicated that if we were now to vote against this motion, that he would be prepared to bring forward an alternative recommendation to include the heritage.
But then it got deferred. Right. So we don't need reconsideration of that because it had been deferred until tonight. Okay. Well, I find it a little extraordinary that Councillor Allen, who's never been to a Municipal Heritage Committee meeting, thinks that he knows enough to move reconsideration just sort of on the spur of the moment like that. There's got to be something else going on here, but I don't know what it is. And everybody heard my comments already. I think this type of thing this is a rabbit hole that we're going to be going down every council meeting if we go along, if we do this. So, I don't know, rather than repeat all the things that we've already said, this was a dilemma, very difficult decision that we made. The heritage easement agreement goes along with demolition. Okay? So if you want to go, the reason that the Heritage Committee voted that down was because we would lose the heritage building, and then it doesn't really matter. So they were talking about putting a wood frame building in its place, clad in brick or not clad in brick. It would be a completely different, it would basically be a brand new house like you see anywhere in the city, just happened to be on the place where a heritage building used to stand. That is what this other option entails, and has nothing to do with heritage, and that's why it was voted down by the Heritage Committee. Councillor Allen would know that if he had been there.
Okay, next on my list is Councillor Neal.
Yes, for some of us, I mean, I either try to attend all the heritage meetings, but we all lead busy lives. I also try to read the information that comes forward. What is being presented or suggested as new information, in fact, is information that was on heritage reports before, I believe, and therefore the information indeed was there. The other thing, if I'm not mistaken, I believe what the commissioner said when asked about the heritage easement by the mayor, said that they had broached that subject with the applicant, who had expressed no interest in a easement. So they, you know, they were asked, are you willing to do a heritage easement? And I do believe that the response was, no, we're not interested in that. And therefore, I think if they had said, yes, let's sit down and do an easement, let's meet, let's work out some kind of a compromise, then this to reconsider nation. I do believe that the applicant, the owner, had expressed no interest in any kind of heritage easement. They were seeking exclusively a demolition permit. And so I cannot support altering my vote that came before. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor George.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think, first of all, don't appreciate cheap shots at a previous speaker.
So, okay.
But having said that,
So let me, okay, so I'm just going to interject.
well, it was a cheap shot.
Okay,
Deputy Mayor,
okay, ladies and gentlemen.
Appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so the point of privilege I'm going to suggest has been made that we do not want to question anyone's motives, but everyone is fully in their right to be able to express their opinion about whether they think that this is a good idea or not. Councillor George.
Thank you. I think to what Councillor Neal had to say, it's possible that yes, they denied wanting to negotiate a heritage easement. My question to staff is, since the decision was made at Heritage Committee yesterday afternoon, have they been approached since that time to reconsider the possibility of a heritage easement? Because that, not knowing what the final decision of the Heritage Committee was going to be yesterday, they may have been playing a roll of the dice to see what came out of the Heritage Committee, and then they might give reconsideration. So, do we have a staff member here that can answer that?
It looks like there's a quick staff conference in the hallway
in here. Holy crap.
So Commissioner Hurdle, the question from Councillor George is relating to whether or not there is interest in the applicant in entering into a heritage easement agreement, and if there was follow-up with the applicant.
That was following the decision of the committee yesterday afternoon or evening, whenever they wrapped up, where they approached since that time to give reconsideration to a possible heritage easement agreement. Because my feeling is maybe they were playing the roll of the dice to see what decision came out of the committee before they move forward with any other ideas.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, we since yesterday late afternoon and tonight we have not approached a property owner, and I want to make sure it's clear that what was in front of the committee yesterday for consideration was actually a motion that the committee had put together, which was supportive of proceeding with demolition. It is only yesterday through conversation that the committee obviously decided to not proceed or not support that motion. But in the past, we've had more than one conversation with the applicant about an heritage easement agreement, and the position of the applicant has always been that he has not been interested in entertaining the conversations about a heritage easement agreement.
Yeah, that's fine. That's in the past. We don't know for sure under whose advice he was acting, but since a decision has since been made by the committee, I mean, I think he may be having second thoughts. I support the view of Councillor Allen, and I know Councillor Holland, I don't want to speak for her, but we did have a little brief discussion. I think it would certainly be, I think, in our best interest to give consideration to the original motion of staff with that attached to it. So they either have to come to the game and play the way staff want them to play, or they live with what they get. But I would like the opportunity, I think, to give that more consideration, the staff recommendation, because I know if this was to go to a board hearing, I mean, I have a suspicion we'd lose again, just like we did the last time around when we had at least 7 members decide to go to a board, and we were advised that, and we ended up spending $52,000. So if we want to keep doing this every time an application comes forward and we have a staff recommendation and we deny, we're going to set an all-time record on money, and we'll have to find out if we have it there to spend. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on my list is Councillor Turner.
Thank you. And Councillor Allen, I think you did a great job in trying to bring this motion back. I think we need to discuss it more, and I know we've discussed it at length, but I still think there's issues we don't understand or we don't know. So I know we have a deadline, as we've discussed. Is there any way we can extend the deadline? So I'm asking the question to Commissioner Hurdle.
Commissioner Hurdle.
Through Mr. Mayor, the deadline is set under the Planning Act, so it's not something that we have flexibility in terms of amending.
So basically we are stuck as we've currently gone through this. Okay, Councillor Schell, you also said that it was 50-50 in what the people had determined. That leaves us in a difficult position here. It's very difficult to decide on something that's 50-50. So I don't know, it's a difficult one. I'd like to go back to the First Amendment of the council, or that you brought to council, if we could.
Thank you. Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you, Your Worship. Staff, just in passing, answered one of my questions, which was that November 9th is the deadline for this. So what I would like to ask staff is, if we don't do anything other than we've already done, what's the consequence of that? I mean, we've turned it down. I assumed, like, it seems to me that the proponent could come forward and make another application. Nothing's stopping them, just because we turned it down. So by reconsidering, we're just muddying the waters. And they'll know perfectly well, if they've got any kind of advice at all, what council thought at least some of council thought it should be involved in this. Could you perhaps straighten me out on that? Through you, Your Worship, to Commissioner Hurdle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. First of all, I want to apologize and clarify. I said the Planning Act earlier, it's the Heritage Act, so I'm sorry, it's getting late in the night. In terms of the question that Councillor Hutchison asked, if Council right now has supported the motion that came from the Heritage Committee, which was to deny the demolition. So at this point, the property owner could choose to go a couple of different directions. One of them would be to appeal this to the Conservation Review Board. The other one would be to continue and proceed with the repairs alteration to their property, which have already been approved by council. In terms of submitting another application to demolish, we need to keep in mind that it would be a reconsideration of council again, because no matter if council makes a decision on the issue and the issue comes back again, then it would require a reconsideration and obviously 2/3 of council to even have that conversation.
If I may continue. It seems to me that a number of councillors are affected by the costs involved. Although that's not a consideration under for the Heritage Committee, because I think they're not allowed to do that. So, given that, I was a bit puzzled by the costs that were submitted tonight. First of all, the company asked for the estimate is a big company that I don't think specializes in this kind of work. So, but the second thing is, perhaps staff can correct me because I find it hard to remember. It seemed to me there was no reconstruction of the house involved. If you build a house, it's a lot more than $85,000. So I'm kind of wondering, was that a fair representation of potential costs? And I didn't say anything the first time because I was so uncertain, but now it appears I have to know much better what was put in front of me. I did ask a question about it to the presenter, but I didn't really get a chance to analyze what he put up there. So staff got an idea about what was up there?
Commissioner Hurl.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, we didn't do a evaluation of the cost estimates that the property owner has put together because, as it was indicated earlier, the review of an heritage application based on potential, what we use as far as our tools, so we don't assessment or an evaluation as to whether or not property owners.
I would just like to point out that if you take $250,000 to $300,000 itself, so the difference between the cost of one option versus the other option is not that great. You got to build the house, or you got nothing. Okay, so and so the argument is not turning on big amounts of money based on what I saw there and knowing something about construction costs. So we should be careful here before we go ahead and ask for just a heritage easement, for example. Maybe that would help. Some people are convinced it would, but not necessarily. It might not make any heritage sense after the fact. And this has happened before. We've had examples given, that this is going to cost me all that money and all that. I've checked on some of them. They're usually fairly widely exaggerated, okay? Because they're only a lot more for that money than the bit they're talking about, okay? So I'm not, I can understand why people are concerned. I appreciate what the councillor did, but I think it's misdirected in this instance. And I wish there was a way that, to go around the bend again, but I don't see how it can be based on what staff says until the November 9th deadline goes by at least. So maybe somebody else can ask the right question and get the right answer, because I don't know quite what it is. But I would say don't let the money mislead you. You didn't see all the costs up there.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, will you take the chair?
I will take the chair, Your Worship, and I recognize you.
Thank you. Can I just ask staff to describe what is in the heritage easement agreement that originally came forward from staff? You give us an indication of what were the requirements if the applicant did demolish the house, what were they required to do?
Mr. Mayor, we did not bring a heritage easement agreement because we did not have a willing property owner to bring a heritage easement agreement. We would only bring those forward once we've had a chance to review, discuss, negotiate, obviously with the property owner, and then we would bring that product to the Heritage Committee for them to review. But in this case, we did not have a willing property owner. I can tell you that what we would have done is use the information that was contained in Andre Scheinman's report as a basis to set the parameters for the heritage easement agreement. And that's what we would have approached a property owner with.
So if council was to defeat this motion and put forward a new motion asking for that heritage easement agreement, a heritage easement agreement based on Andre Scheinman's report, is that something that could be put together before November the 9th?
That's a very good question, Mr. Mayor, and that's why we were having some conversations earlier. It could, as long as there was some delegated authority to staff, because typically the process would require, obviously, the process would be to go back to Heritage Committee and then council in terms of final approval. So we would require some additional delegated authority to staff.
So this is a challenging issue. I think that there is a willingness among council to try to reach out
on this issue to try to work with the owner, to try to come up with a scenario where perhaps a demolition could be permitted with a heritage easement agreement. But just hearing these answers from staff about what would be involved in doing that at this late hour, I just think it stretches the boundaries of the possible. And to be perfectly frank, it was the applicant that refused to enter into the heritage easement agreement. So they had that opportunity. They chose to walk away from that opportunity. And so given that, I'm reluctant to then go to all this extra effort to try to reach out to them again and try to convince them that that really was in their best interests. So based on what I've heard from staff, I'm going to reconfirm my original vote, which was to deny the application to demolish. Thank you.
Sorry, you may have the chair back.
It's late, I understand. Next on my list is Councillor Bohm.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. And speaking after you, I always find that you half the time say what I was about to say. So, so basically, I will also reconfirm my vote. And part of the reason is exactly what the mayor alluded to, is that there was a process that was followed. There was the chance for a heritage easement that was waived, and then we kind of went into this other process. So although I appreciate and recognize what Councillor Allen was trying to do with this, which was, I believe, to have a conversation about how do we kind of, reopen that closed door. I think, we're kind of at the 11th hour here, and especially in this.
Answer that the application was made under the Heritage Act.
Thank you. So what I'm trying to figure out is if we confirm this, that's been done by confirm this at this council, do they then have to wait, kind of hinted at? I'm just trying to figure out how long the time is that they would have to wait if they want to come back again.
Commissioner Hurdle.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So there's nothing stopping an applicant from submitting an application at any time. So they could tomorrow morning submit an application. I think the important thing becomes one of within a year is a reconsideration of council. So if this particular matter came back, it would obviously be a reconsideration of council and require 2/3.
Thank you for that. I'm content to vote the same way this time. They do actually have approval for a lot. They can actually do a lot of work on that house. We're not stopping any of that. So I will vote yes again. Thank you.
So I'm just going to point out, just to clarify from staff, that reconsideration is only permitted once in a 12-month period. So we have reconsidered it tonight. So they will have to wait. They will have to wait for a year if they want. If they want to come back with another application to demolish, they have to wait 1 year. Okay, is there anybody else that wishes to speak that has not yet spoken? Clerk, can I see you for a second? Okay, Councillor Allen, you have the last word.
Thank you. And through you, Your Worship, I appreciate the indulgence of Council for this conversation. I think we learned more through this debate and conversation. I think we've really, I think the results of this is really going to send a message about what we want to see from our heritage, because they won't be able to bring this back. I appreciate the comments from the chair of the Heritage Committee. I think that those of us who don't get the chance to attend heritage meetings on a regular basis benefit from having further discussion in other venues besides the Heritage Committee, because heritage does affect us all. So I do appreciate the conversation and the information that we received. I will also be committing to my original vote on this based on the conversations that we've had. But I think it was worth considering and taking a look at. We got this so fast. I literally on our desks here tonight, not even in our email inboxes, and some ability to like consider or think about it before sitting down here is helpful for us to make the best decision. So coming back to this just helped us kind of reconfirm where we were at in terms of this, and I think that we can feel good moving forward. So I appreciate your extra time and conversation and questions on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So with that, we will call the vote. So just a reminder that this is exactly the same motion that we dealt with earlier. So a yes vote is confirming the recommendation of the Heritage Committee to deny the permission to demolish. With that, we'll call the vote. And it carries by a vote of 10-3. Okay, so where did we leave off? Did we do the minutes, Mr. Clerk? No, so we're back at the minutes.
Moved by Councillor Ostanek, seconded by Councillor Bohm, that the minutes of the City Council meeting number 2015-24 held Tuesday, October 20th, 2015 be confirmed.
Please vote. And that carries. We have some tabling of documents, a number of communications. Is there any other business? Councillor Neal.
Just very quickly, I know that we went for 4 years in the previous council appointing people to be part of the process, the park process, and unfortunately all the meetings convened by the school board were always on council Tuesdays, which sends a very mixed message about partnerships. My concern is that there's a very important public meeting tonight at LCVI exploring the design of the new school, and yet again, that's a public meeting I'm sure several of us would have liked to have attended, but it's on a council night. If we could get a message to the school board that greater consideration of both our schedule and their schedule would be appreciated.
So I think that that's noted, and I think that we are all free to correspond with trustees and to see what options might be available. Thank you. Councillor George?
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to say something very quickly. I don't know where the blame rests, whether it's with staff, whether it's with the applicant, whether it's with the Heritage Committee. But to be put under the gun as we were here tonight is totally unacceptable. I, for one, as a councillor, I don't want this to ever happen again. So the message is clear. I think it's ridiculous that we're given this information as pointed out by Councillor Allen, you know, at the 11th hour, and then we're asked to make a decision that, you know, we have to have in place in less than a week. And I think we just somehow we have to make sure this never, ever happens again from any committee.
So I think that's noted. And again, without necessarily needing to lay blame anywhere, I think we've just made that comment that we need to ensure that we have the proper notice to be able to deal with these decisions. Thank you. So with that, Mr. Clerk, I will ask for bylaws.
So we're going to do bylaws 7 through 9, which are for the secondary suites first.
So
Councillor.
Yeah, sorry. Councillor George has stepped out.
So So it's moved by Councillor Stanek, second by Councillor Bohm, that bylaws 7 through 9 be given their first and second reading. That bylaws 7 through 9 be given their third reading.
Please vote. And that carries. So Councillor George, you can come back in.
So bylaw 2 is deferred to November 17th, so that's been deleted. So it's moved by Councillor Stanek, second by Councillor Bohm, that bylaws 1, 3, and 6 be given their first and second reading.
Please vote. That carries.
It's moved by Councillor Turner, second by Councillor Canton, that bylaws 3 through 6 be given their third reading.
Please vote. And that carries. Motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor Canton, seconded by Councillor Bohm. Please vote. And we are adjourned. Thank you very much.